So, okay, thank you guys for joining us here and taking the time out to talk about this. And, well, and I do want to ask Nick, because I think it is important, about the media and why you think the media coverage has been so negative. I mean, it's been really making fun of this whole event, unfortunately.
It's a sad fact that the UFO phenomenon does leave itself open for trivialization and ridicule when it comes to the media, and there's certainly been on this event that way. But I think my experience shows that it is possible to play this straight, and I know that there are journalists here today. There will be journalists here again till the end of the week, and it's my sincere hope that in view of the very important and powerful and verifiable evidence that's been presented this week, that we will see some more serious treatment of this story. Sometimes it's a bit of a slow burner, and it may be, you know, next week before some of the media articles actually been disappointing so far, but I hope we can turn that around.
Right. And one of the more important stories, I think, and something new that you all, John and Jim, have been able to share is that you've actually ran into some trouble getting your service and medical records for the period of time that this UFO event took place. Can you talk about some of the problems that you've had?
Sure. In January of 2010, after learning from Jim that he had initially put in a claim with the VA for problems that he was having and was denied based on the fact that nothing took place at Rendlesham during the time frame he placed his claim. Through our attorney, I decided to Kyle's office in Arizona. We asked for two things. We asked, number one, for my military records, and number two, for my medical records. The medical records were important because at the time, I'd been sick. I'd been sick in the hospital the year prior with heart issues, and my doctor had went ahead and been trying to treat me, and one of the things that he was running into was he couldn't explain why I was sick. They'd done a bunch of tests, and there was no explanation for what was going on. So what he did was request my medical records. At that point, we sent a packet to Senator Kyle's office, not only asking for the records, but explaining why we were asking for them and some information relating to the incident we were involved in. We received back contact from Senator Kyle's office that on his initial request, number one, my military records were not where they belong, and number two, my medical records. Senator Kyle's office was able to obtain part of my but the interesting thing about my medical records was that the Air Force came back and told him that they were with the VA at that point. After that, I got a letter back from their office stating that there's a good possibility my records were in the classified records section, and that under their initial request it was denied, and I needed to proceed forward with filing a disability claim. And at that point, Senator Kyle could go back in and request my records, you know, under the classified records section. I did all the paperwork, turned it in. Senator Kyle then reinitiated requests for my records in the classified records section, and this went on for over 5 months where I never heard back from him. And I finally got a letter back from him stating that he was retiring. He was unable to do for me, and I needed to follow up with Senator McCain's office.
Mm-hmm. And that's the status now? Now you need to follow up with McCain?
Well, I followed up with Senator McCain's office, and Senator McCain into the VA, but when I was in the VA, it was very interesting. When I was being interviewed for my condition, the doctor had some on my records. When we were talking about my case, she looked at me and she said, there's no record of your medical history from 1979 to 1982, or do I have any record of you being in the United States Air Force from 79 to 82? I showed her my enlistment papers, which showed that I was in 79. And at that point, she looked at me very puzzled, and I said, well, I guess that must mean my records are classified. She looked back at me with her eyes wide open. She says, well, there are some things I don't need to know. And she said, what? And then I looked at her and I said, okay, but if you're the one making the determination on my case, how are you going to be able to judge whether I deserve disability or not without back to me. She says, well, I'm sure there'll be people higher up than me. They'll have the clearance to make that.
Wow. And so, has your experience been similar, Jim?
It's a little different. Like John said, I did try to submit the claim, and it was denied by saying nothing happened at the base. That was during that time frame. Well, I'm in the process right now, working with the attorney to resubmit it with additional evidence, like from the Deputy Base Commander, Colonel Hall, a letter from him. I also threw in some additional paperwork that Nick provided me from the MOD about the radiation levels and things like that. And so we're hoping that, you know, we'll get some results on it. But I'm in a similar situation as far as the records. We did a Freedom of Information Act request, our attorney did, and he specifically asked about, you know, anything on James Penniston and anything on John Burroughs. And they come back and said they didn't have any information.
Wow.
That's impossible. You can't serve and retire from the United States Air Force, both of us, and not have any information on us. I mean,
right.
Let alone the medical records.
Now, Nick, you're an expert on the UK's perspective, or at least their files and investigation into this incident. Is this surprising to you that somehow, even though the Air Force really hasn't alluded to taking this event that seriously, that this is kind of evidence that maybe they did?
The Ministry of Defence case file on the Rendlesham Forest incident shows, I think, two very important things in relation to this. Firstly, the Defence Intelligence Staff assessment is that the radiation levels at the landing site were, quote, significantly higher than background, unquote. Secondly, despite the fact that the public position of the US government is that they are no longer interested in UFOs, the MOD's case file shows that General Gabriel, Commander-in-Chief, United States Air Force in Europe, flew to the twin bases days after the incident, was briefed items of evidence relating to the case back to his headquarters at Ramstein. So that shows you that it was taken extremely right at the top of the chain of command. Now, Jim and John's ongoing quest, I think this is important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the assessment of the radiation suggests that that is something that needs to be looked at by the doctors. But there can't be proper treatment until there's a proper diagnosis. And there can't be a proper diagnosis until they get access to their medical records from their military service, which is why this is not just a UFO issue. It's an open government, freedom of information, and basic human rights issue. And that's why the former Congress people and Senator sitting on the committee at the citizen hearing for disclosure were so outraged this refusal to hand over the medical records. And it's why they have intervened personally to offer to take this forward for John and Jim.
Mm-hmm.
What was, can I follow up on that? Was very interesting. Two things happened. On the break between the two committees that we were on, or, you know, the panels we were on, one of the individuals went out and made a phone call to a lawyer who told him the government doesn't have a right to withhold our records. And after hearing that, he offered two things. He wanted the whole panel, if he wrote a letter, to sign it and send it, one, to the Veterans Administration, and two, a letter to the President himself, asking him to intervene in our case and help us with these. I'm aware of not only is it affecting us, but anybody else in the military that's had anything like this happen to them also.
Mm-hmm. And you're referring to a former Congress member who made this call and wanted to sign this letter.
Yes. Yeah. No, he wanted to draft a letter and have everybody else sign it. That's how upset he was about this.
How did it make you two feel that they were taking this so seriously, that they were, you know, really concerned about this?
I was relieved that they reacted that way. They were feeling our pain. They were understanding our dilemma. Mm-hmm. And they were, as Nick and John have indicated, they were outraged that such a thing could happen to former members of our military.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to clear this aspect up. That do you all feel that, you know, you've had these health issues, and Nick mentioned the radiation levels, but there's also the rumor going around that, you know, you all had been injected with something when you were debriefed. Do you guys remember that happening?
I don't have actual memory of that happening, but it's been confirmed by the former base commander and also the former, he had both titles, Deputy Base Commander, Colonel Hall, that they were definitely messed with, and we definitely had this type of intervention done with us.
Okay, so something happened, and you're hoping maybe these medical records will give you some more insight into that as well?
Yes. The medical records should show, because we immediately started seeking help afterwards, you know, at the base clinic for medical issues, and progressive deterioration or progressiveness of the actual ailments that we were encountering.
And I want to get a sense from Nick as far as you being a researcher, because I mean, even I recently did a FOIA for some service records for an Air Force personnel person who is in special investigations, and it took me a week to get these records back. This seems pretty unusual, doesn't it, that this would take such an effort to get these records?
This is highly unusual, and it's extremely disturbing. I mean, I have experience of handling Freedom of Information Act requests back to defense. So I was the guy receiving requests and responding to them. And I know full well that it's perfectly possible to redact information if parts of it are classified. But I am personally outraged that this medical issue has been allowed to continue in this way. I mean, even if parts of the file have to be blacked out, you know, let's at least ensure that the basic medical information is released, because that's necessary for the proper diagnosis and treatment.
And can I add to that?
Yes, definitely.
One of the things that the senior aide for Senator Kyle told me was this. She said that first they have to verify my records are there, and if they are, what's interesting Air Force whether or not they want to release that part, even to the even people that worked inside the VA have clearances, but the Air Force itself can even deny the fact of those records being released to the VA for me to receive treatment. They can classify our records and keep us from the doctors from understanding what exactly we were dealing with under national security.
Are all three writing a book together, is that correct?
Yes, indeed. We are on a book, provisional title of which is Encounter at Rendlesham Forest. It's coming out with one of the largest and most mainstream publishing houses in the world, St. Martin's Press, and it'll be around March next year when that hits the streets.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for taking out the time, and I hope you have a great rest of your week out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best to you, too.
Yeah, all the best.
Yeah.
Good seeing you again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys.